Hello guys, my name is SVB and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to be looking at Overwatch's newest and already most hated map, and that is Paris. Now the reason everybody hates it is pretty straightforward, and that is the first choke on attack is a bit of a nightmare to get through for people, or at least it will have been before you watch this video, because I'm going to take some time to really break down in detail how each and every player and each and every role can contribute to unlocking Paris Point A. And then we're going to do the rest of the map as well, but I'm going to start with defense because that's fairly straightforward, so we'll get through that, then we'll get to the attack stage, and hopefully you guys can have a bit more fun on this map, because now that it's in competitive, it's important you know all about it. So let's get to it guys. So defense on Paris Point A is fairly straightforward. I think most people already figured out that this high ground is the key, and essentially the best thing to do is set up some sort of shield comp here, whether that's a Reinhardt or a Risa, and then just spam your way to a victory. Now any sort of mid-range DPS really thrive on this map, and anybody who can output consistent damage. So Junkrats, Hanzo, soldiers do really well because they can spam. A Bastion is also very frequently seen here because he can output so much damage and just make it nearly impossible for the enemy team to come through without taking some sort of major blow to their health pool. Another viable tactic is to run a Mei, wait for the enemy to come through and then just wall off this section, isolating a couple members. That works nicely. And while of course you have the option to try and play a dive comp here, I think you'd be silly not to just take advantage of the fact that the shield comp is so easy to run here. Any sort of bunker can get a tremendous amount of value. Now if the attackers do manage to get through, and let's say they go through the alley in the side, well, no problem. You just adjust around and you can hold up here instead, and then you can do your spam this way, making it really difficult for them. And should they go all the way around, well then you're probably going to have to rotate on the point, and that's where things get a little bit trickier. If the attackers do go through from the right side, that's a little bit easier to see because you can see there's full sightlines all the way through to the entirety of their path. So you should still be able to stay up here, hold a good position, and then just make sure you take a couple of them out while they're trying to get to point. Now once you are forced to go on the point, you can see here it's a very, very open physical point itself. And ordinarily, you'd want to do some sort of backs to the wall, hold the corner of the point sort of defense. But as you can see here, there's this gigantic water hazard that is very, very scary to deal with. And unlike golf, the penalty is a bit stronger than just one stroke. It's death. So rather than give away some free environmental kills, I suggest you take one of these two rooms. Now, personally I prefer this room, and I think the reason for that is that you can essentially set up this angle here. Now by putting your shield somewhere around here, say that's a Reinhardt or it's a Risa, you can just keep jiggling back and forth, contesting the point, making sure they're not getting a lot of capture percentage while firing away. Alternatively, if they're on the point, you can always take this doorway angle, and then you're just going to have to peek back and forth, back and forth. And if you're in any serious pressure, you can always retreat behind this cover here, lots of cover on either side. So this doorway is relatively safer, keeps you nice and covered. Of course, there are two flanking doors that you guys should watch out for. So if you do hold this angle, make sure you've got at least one person watching in case of any flankers trying to sneak in from behind. Now across the point, we do have this nice high ground here. But the unfortunate thing about this high ground is that it doesn't contest point. So should you set up here, you can get a nice amount of damage done, but eventually someone's going to have to touch point. And eventually when people start dropping one by one, that's when chaos starts. That's when defenses fall apart. So that's why personally I prefer that room, because it's easier for the whole team to touch the point together. And down here, as you'll see, there's not a great sideline of point if you actually try to take this room. You're in a very, very narrow area, so you're kind of asking for trouble and you can't really see a lot. But ultimately, Paris is all about that defense on that high ground over here. So really, you're just trying to hold this position for as long as you can. And full holds are totally viable, and particularly early on I think you're going to see a lot of full holds on Paris from the team that defends first. But we'll get to breaking that down in a minute. First, let's assume that the attackers have taken point A and you're forced on to point B and they're rushing their way through. Now the thing about Paris point B is that it's a very, very large and open point, and you'll see here that much like Hanamura or Horizon Lunar Colony, there's a lot of space on this map on the physical point itself. Now unlike Horizon or Hanamura, there isn't any significant high ground for you to set up on that overlooks the point, so you're going to have to be a little bit smarter with how you play the defense. Now the best vantage point that you have is probably this little balcony here, because you can set up again a bunker really nice and steady on top here. So if you run an Orisa with a Bastion or a Torbjorn is very good here because the turret over here overlooks the entire point, so you can see he'll be constantly tapping any flankers that come around. So again, same principle as point A. Any bunker set up here, lots of spam damage, lots of good mid-range heroes who can exploit this fact that there's not a lot of great cover on the point itself. And I reckon that when this map does go live in Overwatch League, we may well see a lot of bunker comp set up here, provided it isn't still a goats v goats meta. Now bear in mind that if you hold this angle, there are two doorways for the enemy to come from. So again, make sure you're paying attention, watching for any flankers, but you should be able to get good sidelines of the point from here. And as long as you have even one person touching, it'll be quite easy for you to rain down damage. Now because the point is so open, you do have another couple angles to hold, so you can actually put someone here as well. And you might well find that it's a wise idea to try and get multiple angles. So you might have a bunker over there, you might want to put a soldier over here for example, another DPS over here, and then you got a nice crossfire building, putting a lot of pressure from every angle, and any shield that the enemy might have. So for example, if they're holding and shielding this angle, you can get lots of damage in from behind the shield, make their life really difficult. Now that's the bunker comp, but you may want to run a dive or a Ryan Zarya. So let's talk to that. So again, because this point is so open, dive comps can actually work really well here, because you can get full use out of the mobility of a Winston, a Genji, a Tracer, Doomfist, these kind of heroes. So if you just want to set your Winston diva up here, either side, poke, put pressure on as the enemy try to come through. If you get pressured, well that's alright, you can use your movement abilities to get away, get out of harm's way for a minute, get healed up from your healers, then go back in. And should you spot a flanker coming from one side, oh well that's great, I'm gonna jump here. Spot a flanker here, I can jump here. So there's lots of options here with a dive comp to exploit the openness of Paris. And the advantage is that even if there's a flanker here and the rest of the team is here, you jumping to address this flanker still contests point. So you can essentially do a ring around the rosy where you're constantly staying out of reach of the bulk of the enemy team, but doing enough damage with your dive to try and pick out isolated targets. Now speaking of ring around the rosies, you're definitely going to see a lot of Hammonds hooking onto this pillar here and then just spinning to win. And that is a very viable strategy to stall on defense as well. Now if you don't want to run dive and you want to run a Ryan Zarya or maybe even a full goats, then you want to play for the choke points of Paris. So as I'm going to point out, there's three basically major entrances and they're all kind of choke pointy. So most teams, particularly in sort of the diamond and below elos, are just going to run down main over and over. So you have a great opportunity to just put a Reinhardt shield here and then just have your team behind you, spamming out damage from this angle, making sure that if they come through they take a lot of poke damage, they're down to half HP, and you can always use these walls back and forth to recharge your shield, provide natural cover for your team should they need to duck back and forth. So again, this is a very nice chokehold to hold, and should you get pressured, well you can just back up a few steps and bam, you're back to another chokehold. So same principle applies here, put your shield this direction, use these for natural cover, and you can make it very difficult for enemies to come through this choke. The advantage of being pushed back here as well is that once the enemy comes this far up, you can always send some flankers around either side to try and exploit the gaps and the spaces in between them. So you might well see a lot of Reapers sneakily hiding around this corner, waiting for the team to come in, and then they just sneak in from behind, shotgun a few people, wraith form out. Now the other benefit of standing here is that you should be able to see if the enemy goes either side, you should be able to see them veering towards one side. So let's say they want to go to the right side, well okay, we rotate, and now we got them in another chokehold. That doorway is going to be very difficult for them to come through without taking damage. While they're rotating all the way right, well, this is a very nice window here that's giving us some intelligence. Rotate, get out of the way box, rotate over here, and again we got another nice chokehold to try and pressure the enemy into. And should they go through the left side, well that's alright, again you see them going left, okay, well we'll rotate here, and here's another choke point for you. Not a lot of great entrances for the attackers. So if you can rotate smartly, you can make it very difficult. And again, there's always an option to back up. So should you want to back up, well here's another sort of choke area here. So although it's quite open and looks a bit tricky, you can actually force enemies into quite narrow areas with your Ryan Zarya, or exploit the dive, or set up a nice bunker that's very difficult to break down. But of course, you guys already knew that Paris was tough to break through. So now let's get to the important part, which is how to attack Paris. So as I spelt out, and you guys probably already know this yourselves, that it's this first narrow choke that makes life so difficult in Paris for players in solo queue, particularly in some of the lower elos, where people just don't want to make it through this choke, and they find it really hard to keep dying. So what I'm going to do now is try and give you a really detailed breakdown of how you as a player in every single role can do something to help unlock this point. And we'll start with main tanks, since those are the people who are supposed to engage the fight anyways. Now first of all, let me just come out and say that you really shouldn't play Reinhardt on this attack unless you have a Lucio in your team. Because having played in Gold and Plat recently in my DPS alt, and you can see the full documentation of these journeys in my What I Learned as a GM in Gold and What I Learned as a GM in Platinum series, But having played at those elos, I know that players are very slow to move through areas in a coordinated fashion. And without the speed boost, there's really almost no way to actually get them to hurry up. If you try and stand here as a Reinhardt and usher your team through, I guarantee that your team is just going to stand behind you and poke aimlessly forever. And your shield is going to break by the time half your team are actually through. So you're going to die, the people still behind you are going to die. And particularly if there's something like a Bastion or Junkrat set up top there, you're going to really have a hard time. And for that reason, please don't play a reset on attack on this point. Just don't. Just save yourselves, guys. Just do yourselves a favor. So that essentially leaves us with one option, and that is to dive. So now I'm going to talk through how you want to dive this annoying chokehold on Paris. So as I already pointed out, most of the attackers are going to be set up on this area here. Now before I get into this description, there's one thing I do want to point out, because this is something I've really seen in my alt games in Platinum and Gold and Diamond, and also in the pugs that I've seen with players who are from those elos, is that when they dive, they try to turn every dive as an attempt to win the fight and win the point outright. Now what a lot of people don't know is that sometimes you don't want to dive to kill the enemy, you're just trying to dive to distract them, to create space, and to buy your team some time. So what do I mean by this? Well, the regular IQ Winston is just going to jump straight forward into this point, commit his bubble, commit all his cooldowns, land in the center of the Junkrat, the Bastion, everybody you set up here, and get melted within 2 seconds, then flame his team for not following him. But the Galaxy Brain Winston is going to be a little bit smarter, and they're going to understand that the purpose of the dive is just to buy your team a couple seconds. So what you want to do, guys, instead of jumping the enemy who are bunched up here, try to jump the off angle a little bit. So if you land here, for example, you drop your bubble down and you keep yourself safe for a couple seconds. And now the enemy are all facing you. Instead of facing this choke point where your teammates are, they're now turned and looking to you. So this gives your team a few seconds window to make their way through the choke point, try and get their way to some sort of safety or cover. Now if you get pressured, you have options if you're here, because you can always drop right down here. If you land your jump quite far near this lamppost, you can always make your way out to the other side. And that way you actually force a full 180 from the enemy team to look and pay attention to you. So although it's a small difference between jumping this area here and this area here, it actually makes a huge impact on how the outcome of this fight will go. Because that extra little bit of distance you have from the enemy team is going to alter their reaction time, is going to alter how long you can actually go before being pressured. And those couple extra seconds are key. Remember, we're just diving this area to buy time, we're not trying to commit to the fight. So remember, don't dive in and stay in until you die. Dive in and stay in until you feel sufficiently pressured, when your health bar is starting to go low, when your bubble's breaking, and then you want to just jump back down to cover, because here the enemy team can't get you. And the same principle applies to Hammond basically. Now the basic Hammonds, they're just going to hook up in here, get to this angle, and then they're just going to slam down, commit their shields to this area. Now of course, you might get away with doing this, but it's also quite possible that they have a McCree who flashbangs you, an Ana who sleeps you, a Brigitte who stuns you, and you're dead. So again, rather than committing all your cooldowns just to land in front of the enemy team, and do not a whole lot, you're much better off swinging your way into this right area, waiting for your hook cooldown, and then when it's ready, you barrel your way to the enemy team, you disrupt all of them, you throw them all in different directions, and most importantly, you annoy them. That is the best thing that Hammond is good at doing. He's very good at being annoying, being distracting, and because he's so mobile and hard to kill, you can keep doing this over and over. You roll through one direction, you roll back. If you find someone isolated back here, for example, okay, then slam them. If you slam this person, they're disrupted. If you roll through the Orisa out of the Reinhardt and knock them off the point, that's also another huge win. So remember that the purpose of doing all this is not to try and kill them instantly. It's just to try and make space for your team, buy time for your team. Because sure, a coordinated dive on this high ground here could kill whoever is set up here, but I know that most of you playing and watching this video are not part of coordinated setups, you're not part of coordinated teams, and you're just looking for ways to try and make an impact on your ladder games or your quick play games, where people aren't coordinating naturally. Now, I do want to add to that and say that it's really important that when you're doing all this stuff, you should be communicating to your team. There's no reason why you shouldn't be communicating to your team. Letting them know in voice chat, okay guys, I'm gonna jump on this high ground and I'm just gonna buy you some time. So while I'm up there, while I'm distracting them, make sure you just run through the choke. Because they're not mind readers. And if you just jump in and start doing your own thing, they don't necessarily know what you're trying to achieve. So they don't necessarily know what they should be doing. Now if you're playing Diva, your job is essentially to supplement the Winston or the Hammond. You just want to fly up here, D-matrix your Winston and your Hammond. And by playing Diva, you're essentially buying them a few more seconds, right? The Winston or the Hammond are trying to buy their team 3, 4, 5 seconds you can, with your defense matrix, make that 6, 7, 8 seconds, and now you bought even more time for your team to come through. Again, with D.Va's mobility, it's very easy for her to fly back out, or just drop down, save her cooldowns, and regroup with her team. Now, you could play Zarya. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's much better to go D.Va with the dive. But if you play Zarya, then of course, your singular purpose is just to bubble your Hammond, bubble your Winston when they're going in. And again, make sure they have that extra couple seconds to buy time. Now, let's talk healers. With healers, it's really quite straightforward what you want. You just want to play Lucio, guys. You want to make sure that one of the two of you is playing Lucio. Because as I alluded to earlier, teams are very, very slow in solo queue, moving through chokes. They need that speed boost to feel rushed, and I guarantee you, most choke points are made so much easier by just having a Lucio press his E, press his speed button here, and then make sure that the team just rushes through. Tell your team in voice chat, I'm going to speed when we get to the choke, or type it out in the chat, and make everybody's life easier. Because sure, you could play an Ana and land a big anti-nade. Sure, you could play Zenyatta and get a huge right click to open the point, but these are not reliable ways of helping your team out when it comes to Paris point A. Now moving on to DPS, it's all about flankers, guys. It's all about flankers. Now I'll start off by just talking about this little flank route here, but I'll be quick because I don't really think it's a great flank route. The only person it's really accessible for is Pharah. Now the benefit of Pharah going here, particularly if she has a Mercy pocketing her, is that you can hover around this area and use this as cover. And the biggest value you can get is launching a nice concussive nade over here and trying to dislodge the shield tank in particular of this defensive setup. If you can knock the Reinhardt or the Orisa down to the floor, you've already made a huge win for your team. Suddenly now the protection isn't there for the DPS and the healers. Now they can take lots of poke damage. Now you can get right at them, try and land a few kills, and your team can collapse on anybody who was knocked to the low ground, take them out. But don't overstay your welcome, because this is a very, very open area. So if you start floating around here, you're almost certainly going to die, Mercy pocket or no pocket. Just try and stay around the cover. Now the other flanking heroes can be really, really big here in opening up the point. So anybody like a Tracer, Genji, Sombra, Doomfist, these people who have a mobility ability to just cover this distance in one quick go, or in Sombra's case just run through invisible undetected. What you guys can do is essentially make your way into this alleyway as the first stage, wait for your cooldowns if you have to, then rush through this area, watch past here, don't engage the enemy directly because you're playing the long and patient game. You want to take this long flank route, and now we're in business. Because essentially what you're trying to do is something similar to what the tanks are doing, which is to distract and buy time. Now like I said, a lot of people might go through the alleyway, come all the way around and then just engage the enemy directly. But that's foolish because you're still coming from an angle where they can see you. Their eye line isn't really significantly turned, looking here and looking here. It's not really that much different. So they're going to see you coming all the way and they're going to find it very easy to deal with you. Now the benefit of coming from back here, coming from up here, or any of these sort of flank angles is that first of all, this is not going to be in their sight lines. They're not going to be looking at your way first of all, so you can exploit uncoordinated teams who aren't checking their corners. Secondly, should they turn and pay attention to you, you've already made a big win for your team, and that's to make the enemy turn around and face you. Because let's say there's a Reinhardt set up here holding a shield for his team. Now if you come from back here, you start hitting him with some shurikens, with your tracer gun, trying to hack him, or trying to punch him with Doomfist, you're giving the Reinhardt a very, very difficult decision. Do I turn and therefore lose the shield for my team at the choke? Or do I just stand here and take loads of damage? So all you're trying to do is distract and annoy, just dislodge and disrupt this setup here. Because even the dumbest team can stand and spam this choke without any coordination. But the minute they have pressure from all sides, they're going to find it a lot more difficult to keep their attention in the same place. Now if you get a kill, obviously that's great, but you don't have to overcommit to the kill. Again, like I said with the tank example, you're not trying to commit your cooldown to win this fight now. You're just trying to be patient and buy your time until you can get the right engagement. So don't be afraid to wait till you build your ult, because a Winston jumping here and zapping people and dying is no good. But a Winston with Primal Rage can absolutely jump here, wait till his health gets low, pop Primal Rage, and now he can bash people around. Now he can do a lot of work. Same thing for a Genji. A Genji coming through here and dashing his way across point is not going to achieve a lot. But a Genji with a Dragon Blade in this cluster for sure is going to get a lot of dash resets, for sure is going to get a lot of cleave damage. And a Pulse Bomb stick, a Meteor Strike, a big EMP on this point is going to get so much value, guys. So just play intelligently and play patiently to try and break this point down, because it is very tough and you're not going to find any value by either standing there aimlessly or jumping here repeatedly and dying over and over. And once you disrupt the enemy from the high ground, it should be fairly easy. Like I was saying, It's a very, very open point. There's lots of avenues for you to come from as an attacker, depending on where the enemy is. And you have the added bonus of trying to get some environmental kills. So it shouldn't be too difficult once you force the enemy onto point to take it off them. So, we breathe a sigh of relief. We've done it. We've unlocked point A. Now we're trying to move to point B. So again, point B is quite defensible, but it's also easy to break down should you know what you're doing. So this is a very narrow area, and you can already see here you feel quite tunneled. You're making it very obvious where you're coming from. So you really should only try to come to this entrance. If you're trying to snowball, if you've just capped, you're going for your first run, you want to take the direct route to point. So that's when you want to try and use this route. But don't be dumb and just repeatedly come to this doorway over and over. Mix things up. Try and use the different doorways. So remember that you can come through here. You can come to the left side. You can come through from the right side. And as an attacker, you have the luxury, if you want, of doing a tactical split push. Sending one or two of your teammates from the sides, waiting for them to start annoying the enemy team and diverting their attention in the back line. And then you can push through if you so want to. Now, because this point is so open, you might find it tough as a Reinhardt-Zarya combo, because there's very, very little natural cover. And natural cover is the biggest friend of someone like a Reinhardt. Because if you're standing here and your shield is getting pressured, you have nowhere to hide. This statue is not big enough to cover all of you. This pillar here is very far away. And if your shield breaks midway, you're going to struggle to get through here. So if you do play Ryan Zarya, you're going to have to try and address the enemy team's composition. It's unlikely you'll just be able to roll up to point and then just start brawling wherever you want. So if the team are set up here, then you need to take your team and walk them all the way up that corridor. Take them to that left side, come around this back way, and then get in their face, address the issue, kill them, then you can jump on point. Now you're capping, and now you've just got to deal with this staggered respawns. Again, dive comps, like on defense, will really thrive in attack, because any of your movement cooldowns can cover this kind of distance very, very quickly. So anytime you spot someone isolated, it's very easy for you to jump to them. There's no real ceiling here for you to get stuck on. There's no annoying corners. So you really have free reign as a Winston, Diva, Genji, Tracer, these kind of people, to use your movement abilities to the max. And again, just please don't run a resaw on this attack. You're going to find it so difficult in this open point to set up your shield up in any good angle, and the minute it breaks, your team, again, is just a worse version of the Reinhardt setup where you have no natural cover, nowhere to hide. So you're really, really going to struggle as an Orisa attack. But just be smart with your flanks. Make sure that if you are playing a dive comp, you're using all this space. Look at all this space, all these angles for you guys to come from. Set up multiple angles of approach. So really, when it comes to Paris, guys, I think dive is the key here. Dive can really unlock this point so easily because there's so much room for you to work with. So much space for you to thrive in, so much chaos for you to make, and so many angles for you to exploit. So that's all I got for today, guys. Hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. It really, really helps. I know that most of the community tends to hate a map when it comes out. It was the same with Horizon. It was the same with Oasis. That's usually just because they don't really know how to operate on a certain map, what they should be doing, and that ends up leaving them quite frustrated. So hopefully now, particularly in attack, if you can figure out how to get through that choke in the ways that I spelled out, and there's ways for every single one of you to try and make a difference, then Paris will start to feel a lot more familiar, and you guys will hopefully start to win a lot more of your games. As always, thank you to my amazing patrons who support me and help me keep making the videos. And if you're interested, make sure you follow the link, and in the description there'll also be a link to my Discord server where I host pugs and scrims all the time for players all the way from bronze up to top 500. So come on down for some fun and friendly games, and if not, I wish you guys the best of luck in your games. Go out there and conquer Paris. See you guys soon.